Hi, this is PR Frank, and today I'm going to show you how to use Photoshop text tools, layout, custom brush to create a scene like this, where we do some typographical design. So first let's start with a document size. And from our presets, we can choose web. And let's go ahead and choose 1920 by 1080, which happens to be an HD format size. 1920 by 1080 pixels at 72 pixels per inch for the web or screen. So we'll say OK. So here's our basic layout. Now we're going to go to View, New Guide Layout, and Photoshop has some presets. I'm just going to go ahead and use 4 columns and 3 rows with no gutter. And this will help me guide the eye to create a pleasing layout that is 4 columns wide and 3 columns high. So I went ahead and searched the web for a particular season, and I found a nice winter scene that I like, so I'm going to make this a winter-themed text layout. So I'll go to Place Embedded and put my winter scene photo into the document. Now, of course, it doesn't fit, but I can resize, and what I'm doing right now is I'm using Alt and Shift to constrain the proportions and increase the size from the center. Just like that. And I think I'll move it up a little bit, just so that the rule of thirds looks nicer. If I push it up like this, then the horizon is approximately in the bottom third. All right, so I have my nice background, and now it's time to mess with a word. So this season is winter. I'm going to go ahead and just click once with the text tool and type out the word winter in all caps. It's possible to mess with this word that I've typed using my options bar, but there are many other choices if I use my character panel. So let me get my move tool and my character panel. And let's first start by changing the size of the font. I can click and drag on these 2 T's, and it increases the size of that font. I want to make it big enough so that I can rotate it 90 degrees to the left, counterclockwise, and put it here. So that's pretty close. And then I can pick a font. If you click on the drop-down box, you can see as you hover the fonts, it shows you the different previews. Okay, I like the Bohas 93 right now. It looks like wintry and cozy, so I'll choose that. Make it a little larger. And it's a good idea if the letters are rather close together for this example because of what we're going to do later. So I'll just adjust the tracking into the negative area to squish the letters close to one another. So now we're even cozier. And I'll go to the corner of my text and just click. Sometimes you have to click and then release and then rotate, which is the case here. And as I rotate, if I hold down Shift, it's going to constrain the rotation to degrees that make sense. So in this case, it gets straight, it's a -90. And I can move it over here into the left fourth of my document, giving it pretty even space all the way around, and accept my change. I'd like to fill this wintry text with a pattern created by a custom brush, and snowflakes comes to mind. In order to do that, let's go ahead and create a new document. File, New, and let's use the same size document, that 1920 by 1080. So in order to create my custom brush, the first thing that I'd like to do is create a snowflake here. So I'll choose this snowflake, and I'll make sure to draw it black. The next step is to flatten these into a rastered layer. So I'm just going to select both layers and go to Layer, Flatten Image. So now it's rasterized, and I just use my rectangular marquee tool to draw a rectangle around that snowflake. All right, so I don't need too much space around it, but there's an even amount of space around that snowflake. And then I'm going to choose Edit, Define Brush Preset, and I can call it Snowflake. So now if I look into my brushes, click on a brush and I drop down my brushes, you can see that I have this 1048 that represents how many pixels wide it is. Snowflake, if I hover it, that's the name, Snowflake. And now I can use that in any document. So I'm going to switch back over to my other document, and I'm just going to create a brand new solid color using a nice light wintry blue that is printable. And above that, I want to make another new layer, and I'll just name this new layer Snowflakes. Okay. And with that new snowflake brush, I have a very large brush. And if I just click, it makes a black snowflake. Let me undo that. I can change my foreground color to white. And then if I click, I have a white snowflake. And I can choose any color I want, and it'll paint that color snowflake. A useful thing to do is go to your brushes panel. I can go to Window, Brush, and now it shows me all of the properties of this particular brush that I have selected now. And so I can start to mess with all these different properties of the brush. For example, if I select Shape Dynamics and the word Shape Dynamics, I can jitter the size. So you can see in the preview down there, the size will change in various ways as I paint along. I can also change the angle at which it paints. You can see they're rotating. So as I paint, the snowflakes I paint on will be a different rotation. I can also choose from diameter and many different things. As you can see, there's controls here. If I have a pen tablet, it's like a Wacom tablet or something with the surface and a pen. I can control the fade, pen pressure, pen tilt. Any of these things can control the size or any of these other properties. All right. Next thing I want to do is control the scattering. I want the scattering to be pretty wide. You can see from the preview that as I increase the scatter, and I can increase it on both axes if I want, it sort of scatters the snowflakes out, which is also controllable. And so now I've adjusted these, and there's plenty of other things I can adjust. But I'll go ahead and just adjust the dynamics and the scattering. And then what I'll do is I'll start to paint with this brush. Let me close the brushes panel. And I'll also decrease the original size of this with my bracket key. So I have a really small snowflake to start with. And let's just use white. Now, as I click and drag, you see what's happening. Those snowflakes fill the background. All right, so after messing with this for a while, I've come up with a nice blue background with a scattering of snowflakes that looks pretty attractive. What I'd like to do is have these two layers take the shape of the text in the winter layer. In order to do that, I need to select both of those layers and merge them together. So I go to Layer, Merge Layers, and it'll merge only the layers I have selected. And now I can create a clipping mask by control clicking and choosing Create Clipping Mask. And now it clips to the word winter. The nice thing about a clipping mask is that I can use the Move tool to move the layer that is making the clipping mask so that I have inside of the letters the exact distribution of snowflakes that I'd like. The other nice thing is that once I've done a clipping mask, my text layer is untouched. I can still edit my text layer. So I can go to my character panel and I can choose, a different font if I wanted to, and it still has that pattern beneath it. But I like the Bohas, so keep that. Now what I'd like to do is take the winter text layer and use the effects of that layer to add some styles. So down in my layers panel, it says FX. And if I just go to blending options, I can choose some various options. So for example, the fill, I can reduce the opacity of the fill so I can see through that to some of the elements in the background. I can add a stroke, help set that off a little bit. I can add an outer glow, maybe change that to white, and increase the spread or the size of it so it has that cold wintry feel. Okay, maybe even take the stroke color and change that to something that's more gray. There we go, that's pretty. So now I say OK, and I have successfully created some stylized text using a custom brush. All right, the next thing to do is we're going to create some text here in the center that's a quote about winter. And I found a nice quote that comes from Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. So making sure that I have the snowflakes layer, or the very top layer, selected, I can get my text tool and start typing out the first word or phrase that I'll use. So in this case, it starts out with I wonder. I use quotation marks and then I wonder. I accept my change. It allows me to type another set of text. The next line is if the snow. So I click once and type if the snow. Right now I'm not worried about placement or size or font. I just want to get all my words on there. And once I have all my words in my document, that's when I can begin to play around with the size and perhaps the color of the words so that they're arranged in a nice block that's interesting to read typographically. And my final result ends up looking something like this. It's easy to read. Some of the rules I followed were the most important words get emphasis, such as love, kisses, and that the text is balanced. I've got larger words coupled with smaller words that balance each other out. And I have a nice base. And I also used my source as a very nice small base at the bottom. One of the other things I did with this is I added effects to the entire group of text. All my text is in one group. I added effects called an outer glow, and that helps to set that text off. Also, as you can see, I've also messed with the fill, so the fill has been reduced to about 64%, as you can see here in my layers panel. The last thing I'd like to do here is put some copyright information on that's going to demonstrate how we can use text to wrap around a path. So I want to draw a circular path. I'm going ahead and get my ellipse tool. In my options bar, I have some choices here as to what I'd like to do with this tool. And I just want to create a path. So if I select path, and I'll start here in the top right hand corner and click and drag while I hold shift, and it's going to create a perfect circle. It's hard to see that path circle, but it's okay. If I get my text tool and I hover it, you can see perhaps that the text tool changes a little bit as I hover that path. You get a different look. It's like a squiggly line moving through it. And if I click right on that path, now I have a blinking cursor and I can type on that path. And what I want to type on that path is just my information. So let me first just bring down the size a little bit. All right, so there's some text that's starting, so you can see as it's starting to go around the path that I typed. I can accept my change, and even after I accept my change, I can go to the character panel and begin adjusting the font size so it wraps all the way around there. And I want to adjust it just so that it kind of comes back on itself a little bit. And then you can see that information. If I use my path selection tool, it's very difficult to see on this background. Let me turn off some other layers. Let me add a solid color just temporarily behind this so you can really see my text. All right, so you can see the path, and there's the text. And there's two adjustments here. There's one adjustment at the front that controls where the text ends. There's one adjustment here that controls where the text begins. All right, so now I have the PR Frank at the top, and I'm actually using that same font that I did for my winter scene, which is fine. It's starting to look pretty good there. Now what I want to do as a final measure here is just put one snowflake in the middle. I think that'll add to the attractiveness of that design. And I can do that with my brush. if I just make sure that I have my snowflake brush, I can make a new layer and just click once in there, reduce the size of my brush so that it fits nicely inside of that path. And now I have that snowflake, and it seems like the text is now circling around the snowflake, which of course is something I can nudge around with my arrow keys. All right. Now let's get rid of this color fill and turn on everything again. Now, so in order to make this look good again, I've got to play around a little bit. I've got to play around with the effects, and I'm going to group these two so they have the same effect. I just did Command G that time. Now I'll just go to my effects, click blending options, and it brings up the styles or the effects for that layer. And I think we'll try some similar things that we did over there with our word winter. All right. So what if we've learned in this lesson, we have learned how to use a clipping mask with a custom brush pattern inside of a word and to add some effects to that word to give it a nice designed style. We've also learned how to take a block of text and design it typographically so that it's easy to read and balanced. And we've learned how to type on a path and add some of those same techniques we've used across the other words in this lesson. So I hope you enjoy designing a nice scene with a nice quote and that it becomes useful to you in the future of your design process.